Tony D and Little Joan with some screenwriters tips. Today we're going to talk about how to write a comeback comedy. A comeback comedy. A comedy where the characters come back to win after losing. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Thanks for checking out the Pineys. Books 1 through 12 available at Amazon.com. Don't forget Kindle. Unlimited is free. So I just put it on here on my YouTube page. I don't know what else to put up. So what's a comeback comedy? Well, there's plenty of them out there. So if you think of a movie like, there's the one with Kevin Hart and Will Ferrell. Will Ferrell's going to prison and Kevin Hart has to teach him how to survive in prison. Or the one where Will Arnett goes to prison. I think it's called Let's Go to Prison. Stuff like that, where the characters go to prison and then later it's about them surviving and getting out. Comedies like Danny McBride, the character, I forget the name, the baseball player, that's sort of a comeback. The Will Ferrell movie, the race car drivers, basically a lot of them are like that. Anything related to sports. From my era, Meatballs is kind of like that. A lot of times in comedy, you have to set up the characters to either be losers from the outset, or you have to kind of knock them down a peg. I'll give you a great example of that. There's an episode of Archer. Now, if you've ever seen the TV cartoon Archer, Archer's deal is he's the world's greatest spy, and things just kind of work out for him a lot of times, which is kind of funny because he's kind of an idiot sometimes. So he's always picking on Cyril in his office because he's stronger, and that was a running gag for a while. I know the new series, the new later seasons, they kind of reversed that, but for a while that's what it was. So you run into this problem with Archer. How do you make him a loser when clearly he's kind of a winner in most of the episodes? Well, they did it in Archer by going back into his past and revealing that he had these two bullies when he was a young kid in private school because his mother didn't pay attention to him, and they picked on him. And these guys come back, and then he ends up kind of working for one, but then one of them ends up trying to kill him, and it really worked out well if you've never seen that episode, because they show you how these two guys, when Archer was younger and smaller and not strong, picked on him, and Archer hates them. Like, he hates them. And they rattle him when he meets them, even to this day. And even as he fights them, he has to overcome them. But up until that point in the series, he kind of had no problem with that. It was kind of, live and let live. I have that problem with the Pineys. I have to like bring one of my main characters, Hemingway, kind of down to earth and kind of show him vulnerable, usually in the past, before he became the world's greatest hunter. So you have to do that too, unless your characters are kind of losers from the outset. In the movie Meatballs or in Animal House, two of my favorite classic movies, the characters are already kind of losers. Like Delta House is the worst frat on campus. They're maniacs. They always get into trouble. In Meatballs, the summer camp that Bill Murray runs, they just do whatever the hell they want. They're kind of losers, but the other camp, they got their S together, and everybody's super strong, and they get in that competition with them. They've all got matching uniforms, and the guys from the Meatballs, I don't think that's what they're called. I forget the name of their camp, but the main characters, they all have random clothes, and they're not very great at anything. They're kind of good at a couple of things, but their rivals are just beating them until that last, I think it's like a cross-country run or something, is the part of the contest. And there's usually a contest or a sporting event involved. In Will Ferrell's movies, it's usually a sporting event, with the Talladega Nights. That's it. I couldn't think of the name of the movie. Talladega Nights, it's about the rise and fall of Bobby, what's his name? And he starts out a big winner, but then he gets undermined, and then he has to kind of come back. So there's a comeback pattern to that. So it usually starts out with a humbling of the character, right? So in the case of like a sports hero, or is that Will Ferrell movie where they're ice skaters? That one, like they may start out on top, but they're very arrogant, right? And their arrogance leads to their downfall. You know, the other guy from Step Brothers, I can't think of his name. He was in that movie, Walk Hard, where he plays like a Johnny Cash type character. You know, the easiest way is to parody someone like Johnny Cash, his life, or some sport athlete, or to parody a few different ones, take a few elements. The Ruddles were kind of like that, kind of a parody of the rise and fall of the Beatles. Not so much the fall, kind of the fall, but in the case of the comeback, you want the fall to happen in the first act, right? So the opening would be the character on top, and then his fall. It's his arrogance. Maybe there's some cheating involved. Kingpin's another good example of that with bowling. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, Woody Harrelson gets sabotaged, and then, you know, later he has to train somebody, or later he becomes the bowler again. I forget, but he has to beat Bill Murray. Sorry, I got a bug in here. Damn these gnats. Anyhow, you want to start that fall right in the beginning. Right in the beginning. And then usually it kind of fades out and cuts to a few years later, and your main character's at a low ebb. You know? Very low ebb. Maybe they're out of whatever sporting event they were in, or you know, whatever they did before, and they need to come back for some reason. Maybe a friend comes to them, asks them to come out of retirement. Maybe it's a financial need because they got their back up against the wall. Maybe they have to do it for their family or friends. Anyhow, they reach the lowest possible end. Sorry, blowing up. And it's at that point, when they're at their lowest, usually that's when the movie kind of starts. It's about their comeback. So the second act starts, and that's when the comeback starts. And at first, man, it looks terrible, right? You know, in Kingpin, he can't bowl. He's got issues. You know, they got to find a right trainer or whatever for some of these movies. Maybe they got to raise money. Maybe they got to get off drugs first, whatever. But slowly they start to come back. And that's a funny process. There's plenty of opportunities for comedy in that. Plenty of opportunities to parody, you know, people trying to get off of drugs or whatever. So they do that. They get off the drugs. They struggle to get back. There might be still some weakness or some unaddressed issue, like a rival, that going into the second act or the end of the second act, you're probably going to have the guy confront his main rival, which is usually the guy that set up his downfall. In the case of Kingpin, it's Bill Murray. In the case of other movies, I think it's Sacha Baron Cohen in the Talladega Nights movie. And they got to overcome that guy who beat him before, which is usually a good setup. And then they do. Like in the third act, that's the big deal. They finally overcome their fear, their demon, whatever it is. Usually it's something funny. They overcome it in a funny way. And then the movie, you know, you get to the denouement. Or maybe they don't actually win the race, but it's a win mentally or spiritually for them for some reason. Maybe they don't win, but their rival is exposed for the hypocrite they are, and then they go into the purgatory that they were trapped in, and they're not a winner, let's say, but they're not in purgatory anymore, and their life is going to be better. There's some sort of journey there. I think it's better when they just win. You know, I think it's better in a comedy to be very, very blatant about stuff like that, because you don't have a lot of time in the comedy. The important thing about comedy, as I've always said, it has to be funny. Has to be funny. Doesn't matter, even if the plot doesn't quite make sense. You know, you can defy the laws of physics. You can do all sorts of things and break the rules as long as what you do is funny and people are laughing the entire time. So when you get to the end of the movie, you want to try to get the biggest laugh, and then usually the plot stuff, you just want to wrap it up. So keep it simple. I say keep it simple. Don't try to overcomplicate it. You know, it's usually a very simple thing to make the main characters losers, or to make them former winners that became losers, and then they win again. They go through a struggle and they win again, or they win for the first time. They shouldn't win, but by some miracle they do. Because they're the good guys. They deserve it. The other guys are bad guys. Dodgeball is another example of that. You know. And you can do crazy things. Like if you could dodge a wrench, you could dodge a ball. Clang. Like stuff like that. That's not realistic, but it's funny. It's funny. And then when the good guys win, the movie is basically over. Maybe you have a quick denouement, couple of other bits you wrap up. One of the characters hooks up with another character you never expected, or you kind of expected it, but it's weird. Somebody gets married, you know, a parody of that, parody of like the Star Wars ending, whatever. You make it a big ending, but you're basically done. The moment they win, it's over. It's over. The character's completed his journey. The laughs are done too. So you don't have much time before it starts to get boring. You know, seeing the character get everything he wants, it's done. It is done. So maybe you have one little gag at the end. One of the characters who got left behind finally catches up, something like that. You know, in Animal House, it was the wrap-up. Each character, they had a little wrap-up of what eventually happened to them after college. And that's fun. In Kingpin, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, Woody Harrelson wins. I think he wins the tournament, and Bill Murray finally loses, if I'm remembering correctly. He wins somehow. God, it's been so long since I saw that movie. But the main thing is that the movie should wrap almost immediately. You'll notice that third acts in comedy tend to be very short, because the comedy happens in the second act. Once you have all the big payoffs in the third act, the movie's over. Give him all the big payoffs. And you build all those up throughout the first and second acts. And then you hit them with the payoffs. You say, thank you, good night, everybody, and you're out. It's kind of like a stand-up thing. You know, when stand-up guys are doing their bits, they may do a running gag or build up to something, and when they get all the way back to what they started in the beginning and do a big callback, maybe they do a callback in the middle, but when they do that third callback, generally that's what they end on. Sometimes they keep going if they don't get that big laugh, but they might make one more comment, but usually they position that right, and boom, it's a big send-off. You know, so that's a comeback comedy. Character comes back. It's pretty simple. And that's it for me, Tony D, and Little Joan. We'll be doing the live stream tonight at 7. The theme will be New Jersey movies made in New Jersey, movies about New Jersey, and we'll also be talking about the box office and stuff like that. That's at 7. See you for the live stream.